Thank you, man. Let us pray. Dear Lord, please help with tonight. Let it be said what you want said. Let it be learned what you want learned. Let your name be glorified in all that we do always, Lord, but especially when you're studying your word to understand that this is growth in a message you have given us. Everything in Scripture has been put there for a reason, and that is for our edification and growing and understanding more about you, more about your history, more about your movements in history, more about our spiritual ancestors, more about how to become more like Jesus Christ. Lord, we love you in all that we do. Help me tonight as the teacher. Help those that are here to be illuminated by the Spirit to grow, and let them put forth whatever they need to grow. For your name we pray, Jesus, help us tonight. For your name be the glory. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys, we will start with our pop quiz here. What year are we in?
2019.
No. Wrong. Already y'all failed. That's all I'm saying. What year are we in?
We gotta go all the way back to January. They're still in April.
There you go.
57 AD.
What year are we in, guys?
57 AD.
We are in Acts 21. What year are we in?
55, isn't it?
We're getting closer. I've got one person get it right so far, but you're all getting closer, much closer in this range right here. But whoever's in the 50s range is getting close. You're getting close. Much closer than 2019, so put it that way. We're in the 50s range. Anybody know the exact date? So I've had one person get it right behind me. No taker back, I got it right. Does anybody else know?
52.
Close.
53.
Close.
54.
Close.
55.
Close.
56.
Close.
59.
What? Dennis got it right. 57. We are in 57 AD. AD 57 is how you're supposed to say it, but I know you guys don't like it when I say it. Scholarly, so I'll say it the other way. 57 AD. We're in May. How we know that is, we're at the Feast of Pentecost, okay? This is how we know all this. And this is going to be a time in history. What is it like in the city of Jerusalem right now? This is going to be huge, not only for this chapter, but what's going to happen in the next decade or so in Jerusalem. What is the situation like in Jerusalem? What is the cultural
High
atmosphere?
tension.
The Jews,
Chaos.
and the Jews, they want everything about the Jewish.
Okay.
They're very
This,
strong.
what you call this is what's called Jewish nationalism. That's what it's called. There's Jewish nationalism, there's political unrest, there's increased hatred for Rome, there's an inflamed anti-Gentile sentiment where outsiders are not trusted. With that being said, how is Paul's mission going to be viewed? Because remember, at this point, his mission is predominantly, almost including Jesus, to who?
Gentiles.
The Gentiles. And if this is your attitude in Jerusalem, how are a lot of people going to view Paul's mission?
They don't like it.
They're not going to like it, are they? It's not a time to do this, because remember, we are 9 years away from 66 AD. What happens in 66 AD?
Jewish revolt.
The Jewish revolt against the Romans, which culminates in 70 AD, which happens in what in 70 AD?
They tear the temple.
They destroy Jerusalem. The Romans destroy the temple, destroy Jerusalem, tear down the walls, kill thousands. Remember we talked about this. This was all predicted by Jesus. One of the main Roman leaders at this point is a guy named Felix. I think there was a cartoon named Felix, wasn't there? Okay, so that's easy to remember. Felix is one of your main Roman leaders, and he's not liked by the Jews either. Okay, he's going to come onto this scene. He will play from AD 52 to AD 59. He'll be in charge. He was not well liked. This is going to add fuel or just flames to that already, fuel to that fire already going on here. But within this time, there are other things going on. Anytime you have hatred from the Gentiles, there's also going to be an increase in messianic hopes and expectations. So, you're teaching Jesus is the Christ, good news. There's going to be a lot of people accepting it. Okay, Jews-wise. That's good, right? But there's also going to be a rise in terrorism at this point. Who are the terrorists I mentioned in particular? They're going to be known as the assassins. I mentioned them Wednesday night. What are their names?
I remember you calling them, but
That's probably going to be the sect that,
Getting close.
man, one of the disciples come out.
This is a debate. You're right. You're thinking about the Zealots. And there's a debate. It's the Sicarii. And there's a lot of people who think the Zealots come from the Sicarii. Now, that's debated. But yes, that's fine with me. And if you wrote it in a cast, I'd say fine. It's the Sicarii at this point in time. They might be the origin of the Zealots. We don't know. But the Zealots, yes, their whole movement's going to come up at this point in time as well. The Sicarii are going to be those people. Remember, assassins in that time period, what you really wanted to be is you wanted a lot of crowd. Okay? And remember, when you're in a big crowd, it's not like here walking down the street. At that point in time, everybody's touching. And if everybody's touching and you go up to somebody and put a knife in them, are they going to put the knife in them? Not at all. Because yeah, exactly. And so that's what they're going to do. And anybody who doesn't view the law like they view the law, particularly higher up people, but anybody's at danger at this point, could be assassinated by the Sicarii. They're going to be an uprising. We'll see more about them a little later. We also have with this Jewish self-identity a renewal of the ancestral customs, which means what?
Back to the Jewish law.
Back to the Jewish law. Back to the Jewish law. Back to the Old Testament. Back to the things of Moses. Back to anything that made a Jew and distinguished him from a Gentile. It's going to be really big in Jewish self-identity. So this loyalness to the law was big if you were a Jew in Jerusalem. And where's Paul stepping foot in right now? Jerusalem. And what is his message going to be distorted as? Anti all this.
Yes.
This is a cultural boiling pot at this point, and that sets the tone. We will go over it here, just quickly read these verses. I had so many questions asked me about some things with this, and we'll quickly read this again, and if you miss something, I'll try to cover it this time. Just ask me. Start with 17 and 18.
When we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present.
So what James are we talking about by this point? Remember, we're in Acts 21. Which James are we talking about at this point?
It's going to be Jesus' brother.
Yes. And what role is he playing right now?
He's the head of the Jewish church.
He is the head of the Jerusalem church. We're in Acts 21. We're at verse 17 and 18. Acts 21, verse 17 and 18. Who is the head of the Jerusalem church? James, Jesus' brother. When does he die? Well, that's the other James, actually. That's the apostle. This is going to be James, Jesus' brother. When does he die?
I want to say 70, is that right?
62. How does he die? He gets thrown off a cliff. Why is this the case? Because the high priest got upset with him. So remember, he's having to live in Jerusalem with a Jewish culture, which if he offends Jewish sensitivity as well, what can happen to him? He can be killed. So could all the rest of them. They know this. They're living there. Paul doesn't live there. So it's easy for him to preach this all-inclusive Gentile message. He gets to go home tomorrow. But they live there. So this is going to be a bigger ordeal for them than it is for, let's say, Paul. But it starts out, everybody's welcome. And remember, this is the huge thing. Why did Paul come to Jerusalem to begin with?
Bring the money.
I get a lot of questions about that. What did we say about that? That doesn't get mentioned as much in Acts. I think it might get mentioned, Paul later might mention like in Acts 24 or something, but it doesn't get mentioned. It's the relief fund for the poor. Where do we say we find that? Because I've had some questions about that. Where do we say, how do we know about that mainly?
You said you created 2 or 3 places. I can't remember.
Yes, but where will we go?
Romans
Other
5.
places. Remember, if you're looking at, what genre are we looking for? If we don't see it in Acts, where else can we look in the New Testament to find stuff that's going on during this time?
Romans 15.
Paul's letters is what it's called. That answers your question. A lot of people ask me about that. How do you know this? The answer is, if it's not an Acts, you can very often go to Paul's letters. Somewhere in Paul's letters, because remember, he's the guy experiencing this, and he's the guy who writes those letters in the New Testament. So what you do is you systematically put them together, and that's how you find these answers. You can look in Romans 15, Galatians 2, 1 Corinthians 16, 2 Corinthians 8, 2 Corinthians 9. That's how you know about this relief funds. Although he does mention it seemingly in Acts 24, you do it systematically. But it's overshadowed here, although this is probably when he gives it to them. Why is it overshadowed here? There's 3 or 4 different theories. Just throw one of them out there. What do some scholars think? Why does it not get mentioned? This is a huge deal. This is why he went. Why would it not have gotten mentioned? What are some possibilities?
Well, they're sort of getting on to him about saying that it's all inclusive. It's not, going to the Jewish way.
So one theory is if they accepted it, it might cause them problems, right? That's one theory. There's another theory that they will accept it, but they will only accept it upon Paul doing the stipulations they're about to say.
Yeah.
There's another theory that says there's no problems at all with it. It's just you got so much other chaos going on, it gets overshadowed. And yes, there's so much other stuff that's more important at this point, it overshadows it. Okay, verse 19 and 20.
After greeting them, he related one by one the other things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified God, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They were all zealous for the law."
Okay, we'll skip on through this. They start out good. Paul's going to give us 4 or 5 year missionary work, detailed report of everything he's done, what God has accomplished. They start out by recognizing that God is present in Paul's ministry, and then they give a mission report of their own. This is going to be big. Another question I was asked about this. This is going to be big. James and the elders say, hey, we have a successful evangelical, basically missionary effort of our own, and we've got tens of thousands in the Greek of Jews coming to faith in Jesus as the Messiah, but they are what? Zealous for the law. I was asked, would that mean they were truly saved? Yeah, all indications they were. And that's what's playing on this, why some of this gets confusing for some people. They were zealous for the law. Being zealous for the law is not a bad thing. It's if you view it the wrong way. And this is what's going to be problematic for some of these people. We don't know how far along they were. But using the terminology of zealous for the law was what was used for those who, those Jews who overcame Antiochus the Fourth. Remember what he did when he sacrificed the pig to the Zeus of altar in the temple in 167 BC and all that? Right. The Jews who came in, the first Maccabees, were considered zealous for the law. So it's almost a nationalism right thing to be called this. And remember, we're at a time of Jewish nationalism running high. So the zealous for the law carries with it that historical notion. But it means about being passionate and committed to the daily living and requirements of purification within the Mosaic law itself. Who exactly these Jewish believers are, what do we say they could be? They could be what? 1 or 2 things to think of here. What could they be? They can be new converts who aren't mature yet. Okay, that's a possibility. Or they could be being influenced by Pharisaic, Judaizing type teachers we've seen earlier. Okay? This is why you got to know your scripture. You got to know it's right, because just because it sounds good doesn't mean it's how it is. Okay? And so they could be these people. Although they don't seem to be as extreme as the Acts 15 people, they do think the law is a fundamental part of Christian life. We'll see how this works here in a minute. Okay? Now let's see the accusations that are going to be huge to all this. In verse 21. Read that.
And they have been told about you that teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs.
Now, what do we say in answer to this? Does Paul do this? What's the answer to this?
No.
What do we say the answer to this was?
Yes and no.
Yes and no is the answer to this. Yes and no. It depends on how you're viewing this, okay? I think no is the right answer, but there are some who say yes, and the way they say yes, I see how they say yes, put it that way. I think no is the answer, but here's the deal, okay? They don't specify the source. They're just, listen, now we got these allegations that are going on right here. And basically what they're saying is, Paul, you're teaching the Jews who live among the Gentiles to forsake their Jewish identity. So this is not about Gentiles. This is only about Jews who live among the Gentiles. They've got to forsake their Jewish identity. And they've got to abandon the Mosaic law. They've got, which by the way is apostasy, which can lead to his death. They've got to abolish circumcision, and they've got to stop this daily custom thing. Now what we said about this is, when does Paul say it's not okay to do these things?
He does.
Well, he does at a point. Remember, if you look at it like it contributes to your salvation, or you look at it like a Gentile must do that to become a Christian, or you're imposing this on Gentiles, that's when he says, you can't be doing this stuff. But if you're just a Jew and you want to do this stuff, he allows you to do it.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's not going to get you to heaven.
They
That's
look
right.
at it as a source of salvation.
Yes.
And he's trying to get them to see that that's not the source.
Yes. And see, this is where people were asking me questions Wednesday night, and a lot of people get confused. The Jews can continue keeping the law.
Yeah.
They can continue to uphold circumcision. They just had to have the proper perspective of the lens of Jesus Christ. They could not, and when you see Paul say things like, Christians are not under the law and circumcision is nothing, he's doing it because you're not obligated in the sociological sense to do these things. And you can't impose it if you're a Jew on a Gentile to do these things. But as a Jew, you can be a Torah observing, law abiding, Hanukkah, whatever, yarmulke wearing Jew. All you want is to be a Christian. He's okay with that. So he's not telling them they got to stop being Jews. He's just saying you can't impose this, and you can't say this is any way going to make me acceptable to God if I do these things. I'm not more holy if I do this.
It's not going to get you one step closer to heaven.
That's right. That's what he's saying. So for him, it's about proper perspective.
Yeah.
And that's why it's yes and no. Okay? So does everybody get that? That was a question I got a lot of. How does that work? Because really, when you read Paul's letters, if you just take the context, you could almost sound like that's what he's saying. You've got to remember the context. And in the context of Romans 6 and Galatians 3 and Galatians 4 and 1 Corinthians 7 and Galatians 6, he's dealing with people who are trying to impose this, as you would say, to make you more holier than thou, or to say to contribute to salvation somehow. So in that context, he's against it, but he's not always against it. It's as long as you got the proper perspective. So that's the answer to that. That's a lot of questions I had on that. Anyway, the elders know we got to do something, even though really these rumors are baseless. You know, this is in the overall whole. These are baseless. He's not trying to tell Jews to stop being Jews. Okay, right? Yes.
Kind of question too, because we're studying. You know, we've been going through Acts too, and in there, and when in my studying, I see he's actually struggling with it too.
I think so. Yeah.
Because he was raised.
Yeah.
With all those customs.
Well, I tell you, who really struggled with it was Peter.
Here.
Yeah, Peter was the even bigger one. And there are some people who say Paul does as well, and I'm fine with that. But Peter, remember when the sheets of food came down? And he's having a vision from God. And he's going, I'm not going to do this, God. I don't care what you say, God. No. But I think Paul does as well. But we point blank see Peter doing it. Yeah. And so I think a lot of these guys struggle with it. Yeah. I think you can say Paul struggled with it. We know Peter struggled with it. James, the brother of Jesus here, Barnabas,
it's a brand new concept to them that you mean for what we have been doing since ever.
That's right.
Does it really count anymore?
It's going to be different now.
In Jesus?
That's right.
That had to go over their heads so far.
Because remember,
it seems too easy.
Well, they rejected the one who was sent.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. It goes back to ingrained traditions hard to break even when it's wrong. Hey, it's what we've always done. You know, if it's what we've always done, it's got to be right. And even if that's what it goes back to.
Well, to me, it sounds it's like Lydia. You know, she was a worshiper of God, but she was lost.
Yeah.
I mean, so that means you can worship God, but you can still be lost.
That's right. Exactly. That's right. And so these are things, and you guys have nailed it, and that's what a lot of questions that were asked to me. It's going to be the context of it, and I think Melissa brings up a really good point on that a lot of these people, they were all struggling with it because we're having to make a change. And change is always hard. And that's going to be a key point in all this right here. So that verse 22 to 24, just quickly, I think we're done with, I think most of you get all the rest of this. 22 to 24.
What then is it to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourself along with them, and pay their expenses so they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have told about you, but you yourself also live in observance of the law.
Okay. So what they're going to do is they're going to basically, we want to counteract these false rumors. We're going to do a kind of practical maneuver. Here's the course of action. We strongly desire you to do this, which means you're going to do this, Paul. It's kind of a request, but not really. What are the 2 things that are said to do here? 1, he needs to undergo this purification rite in the temple. 2, he needs to pay the sacrifices of these 4 men who are undergoing the purification. And they're undergoing this vow themselves. What vow are they going under? We said this Wednesday night, and you can tell from the text. What is it?
Nazarite.
Nazarite vow. How do we know that?
Because it's talking about cutting the hair off.
Yes, very good. Very good. This is going to show that you're sensitive to Jewish concerns about Jewish practices among Jewish believers. This has nothing to do with Gentiles whatsoever. That's what confuses a lot of people. This doesn't compromise faith either. You can still do all this stuff, remember, through the proper context. This doesn't compromise faith. It's in no way opposing you on Gentiles, as verse 25 will show. And in this scenario, what the Nazarite vow would do is, remember, it's where you're asking for God's intervention and you're promising God something in return. And for 30 days, you're going to refrain from 3 things. What are they?
Sex is one of them.
What now? Sex?
Eat and drink.
Well, you drink. That's it. I mean, I'm sure sex is what you throw it in there, but what now?
You didn't drink any wine.
You didn't. No intoxicating drink. None of that. Number 2, you didn't cut your hair. Number 3, you didn't come in contact with anything dead. Okay? So you weren't going to any funerals. Anything like that. So, okay? So no intoxicating drink. Wine's the big thing, but it could be anything of that. No cutting of the hair. No defiling yourself to touching dead bodies. You can read about all this in number 6, by the way. If you want to jot that down, that's where it comes in. Now, this is where it confuses a lot of people. If you were just to read it, you've got to take it, commentaries, and break this down. He is asked to join the 4 men, not the Nazarite vow. He couldn't be asked to do that. Why was that?
Because he's not a Jew.
Well, he's a Jew. Paul's a Jew. Why couldn't Paul engage in a Nazarite vow at this point in time?
Don't you have to be a child?
No.
No.
These guys aren't children. You got to engage 30 days. He's only got a week. This is how you know. And see, even your quick Sunday school lectures will miss this. That's impossible. It is impossible. There's a scholarly debate. Could you have a shorter Nazarite vow? Very few accept that, and you would need to prove that. There's really no proof of that, okay? So we know they really can't, so he's going to have to associate and show a support for them is what it's saying. And then he himself is going to purify himself through this 7-day purification rite where you wash on the 3rd and 7th day, based on Numbers 8, 19, and 31. And this is where a Jew would travel through Gentile territory and come back to the Holy Land as they classified it, and say, I've been impure, I am dirty, I've got those Gentile kudus on me, wash them off, ritual washing, ceremony purification, and particularly for any Jew coming back to the temple, he would have to do it. And then he's asked to pay for the expenses of these men. There are 2 possibilities here. One of them is he would have to pay for the expenses of their sacrifices when they complete their Nazarite vow. What would be involved with that? That would be the cheap version. If they become, that's just number 2. If they somehow were to become unclean, they do a cheaper version. It would only be doves and pigeons. But if he's asked to pay for their conclusion of the Nazarite vow of 4 men, here's what he has to pay for: a year-old male lamb, a year-old ewe lamb, a ram, a basket of bread, and various grain and drink offerings of 4 people. That is a lot of money. So if he is asked to pay that, it's almost like an NFL wide receiver getting a $10,000 fine. It's almost like this point in time. It is a lot of money any way you look at it, okay? And he's getting fined right here. And what they're going to hope this shows that the rumors are false, that he's not opposed to the Jewish law, he has not forsaken his Jewish roots, and that his outreach to the Gentiles is not anti-Jewish. Then in verse 25, we have a recap of Acts 15. And this is where a lot of people get confused. What was this doing here? Read verse 25.
But as for the Gentiles who have believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality.
So basically, for the Gentiles, they just got to not get engaged in idolatry. Make a break with that. Why in the world would that be mentioned right here?
Because it would offend the Jews.
Well, what are we making sure at this point in time we're being very clear about?
They didn't want that because the Gentiles were so influenced because of the idolatry that they was coming out of, they didn't want them to go back and start fooling around.
Now think about this. Think of the context we're in. We're in a context where we're about to get all Jewish. And what's the one thing we want to be clear about when we're getting all Jewish? That you don't have to be all Jewish to be saved. So that's why we throw this in there. We're letting it be known at this point. All the Gentiles got to do is avoid idolatry.
You don't have to convert to Judaism.
Yes, you don't. Yes, a Gentile doesn't have to become a Jew to become a Christian, and that's what this is saying right here. It's saying, listen, we're in no way are we going against what we did back in Acts 15. This is not about salvation. There's no sociological language in this. The Gentiles are not involved. This is a Jewish thing and Jewish thing only. This doesn't contradict anything we've done. It is important they threw it in there. Otherwise, there'd be people to this day trying to say what? You got to do this to be saved. So they made sure they had this safeguard there to let you know, no, we made that decision back in Acts 15. The decision was the Gentiles had to avoid idolatry. This did not do with them. They're not in the picture. So that's why that's thrown in there, to safeguard. Okay? So now we got verse 26.
Then Paul took them in, and the next day he purified himself along with them, and went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification would be fulfilled, and the offering presented for each one of them.
Okay, so what this does, Paul agrees, goes to the temple, he makes the vow, he goes to the symbolic purification. Why is he doing this? He's showing his commitment to the unity of the Christian body, and he doesn't mind forfeiting his own rights. We mentioned this ending. This is that 1 Corinthians 9, is what this is. To the Jew, the Greek, the Greek. And yes, although that means you go preach, so that's what he's doing. But at the same time, as the mature Christian, you've got to forfeit your rights in cultural sensitivity situations for the sake of the gospel in particular. And when he knows in the cultural setting of Jerusalem right now, if he doesn't do this, the boiling pot that it is, that it could completely throw a loop in his ability to evangelize to others the gospel of Jesus Christ. So at this point, he'll be a Jew for Jews' sake. And quite frankly, he loves the Jews. We know in Romans, and I think Melissa was right, he's struggling at this point, even move away from Judaism, and that type of ideology of a lot of these things. So he doesn't mind it at all, but he's doing it for cultural sensitivity for the sake of the gospel. And what this is showing is the Jewish Christians were allowed to maintain their Jewishness as long as they viewed it properly. I think we still miss that a lot, even in modern day times, because we read so much of Paul and it sounds so anti-law and anti-circumcision. That's not it. It's just making sure you're doing it where it doesn't compromise salvation or compromise the outreach to the Gentiles or try to impose upon them these things. It's okay for them to maintain this. And this is what he's saying. The Jews can remain Jews as long as they got the proper perspective. And that leads us to verse 27. So he's doing this. This is irony in all this. He's doing this to maintain harmony and unity and peace and show his Jewish roots and show that he's cool with who he is, and he has no problems with the Jews. I am a Jew myself.
He don't want to offend them. He wants
to
save them.
There's going to be some irony in all this, because that's exactly right. So he's doing this for peace and harmony.
This was a transition period from the law
Yeah.
to grace.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Now, what's the irony is, he's doing this for peace and harmony, and what happens to him? Keep in mind why he's doing this. And now we got verse 27. Go ahead and read verse 27.
When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him.
Now remember, he's doing this for peace and harmony.
They ain't praying for him.
No, they're not. They're not. Right. So they're laying hands on him and not praying. That's right. That's right. So the scene starts out, he's finishing the 7-day purification ritual, and he goes to immerse himself and complete his vow. He's going to show everyone he's not ashamed of his Jewish roots, and he wants to maintain unity. But in the midst of maintaining unity, he runs into extreme danger from some old foes. Luke identifies these foes as the main instigators of this scene. They are Jews from Asia, which doesn't mean China. It means where?
Ephesus.
Ephesus. That's noted. Yes, Ephesus. And remember, he's been in Ephesus a little bit. These are going to be the Jews who reject his message about Jesus as the Messiah and resent him for his influence on their Ephesian synagogue. What does he always do when he goes to the synagogue? He splits it. That's right. So they don't like him for that. Just so happens, this group's in town to celebrate the Feast of Pentecost. Okay, they're on a religious pilgrimage. And they decide this would be a great time to deliberately instigate trouble against Paul and get him back for all the trouble they felt he caused them. An eye for an eye. Lex talionis.
He caused great grief.
That's right. So he deserves to suffer. And that's what they're going to happen here. Verse 28-29.
Crying out, "Men of Israel, help. This is the man who is teaching everyone everywhere against the people and the law in this place. Moreover, he brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophimus and Ephesian with him in the city, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple."
Okay, so they start out by loudly and continuously shouting, "Men of Israel, help! Men of Israel, help! Men of Israel, help!" What do you think they're doing? Fire! 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 When I yell, what's going to happen? Y'all, I'm getting everybody's attention. I'm getting everybody's attention. And that's what they're getting everybody's attention. And they're summoning other Jews. Get over here, get over here, get over here. So they're summoning all the Jews they can to assist them in their efforts to subdue Paul. And then once they get everybody's attention, they're going to attack his theological teachings and accuse him of speaking against our law, which is the Torah, this place, which is the temple, referring to his teaching about Christ being the new place of atonement and worship, and an attack on our people, referring to the fact that he has reduced the significance of the Jewish people as no longer God's special chosen people, but now there's this teaching of equality in Christ where everyone's equal before God. We're not special anymore. This man's taking away our specialists. Saying that. And then the most dangerous of the accusations is bringing a Gentile, Trophimus, into the inner temple precincts, the area that was only open to Jews, and intentionally defiling sacred space, which even by Roman law carried what? The death penalty. So, we'll take his theology, and we're going to bring up some serious legal accusations against this man. So what do you need to know? And this is where it gets a lot of confusing for people, and this is where I had some things laid out. I'll make it oversimplified here. In order to understand this, you need to understand where the true temple started. And this is where it gets confusing. In the Herodian temple, this is not the same as Solomon's temple. In the New Testament Herodian temple, you had the outer court, which is the court of Gentiles. Well, the true temple didn't start until the court of women. Okay? This is when the true temple actually started, according to Jewish thought at this point in time. And it was open to all the Jews. Okay? So you go court of Gentiles, court of women, then you go to the court of men. This was only open to who? Men. Israelite men, Jewish men. Okay? Then you go to the court of priests, which is open to who? Just the priest. And then you had the Holy of Holies type things, which was only accessible to the high priest one day of year. What day of year was that? Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Okay? So, this is important you know that. Okay? So, the court of Gentiles, court of women, court of men, court of priests, Holy of Holies. Now, between the court of Gentiles and the court of women were these warning signs that said any Gentile who enters is subject to death. Okay? As one commentary explains, Gentiles were not allowed to enter into the main temple area. That'd be the court of women moving forward. 4.5 foot tall stone markers inscribed in Greek and Latin warned any potential violators and announced to foreigners that they were prohibited from entering the sanctuary. Don't go any farther. 2 of these notices have been excavated. Okay? They read in Greek, no foreigners may enter within the barricade which surrounds the temple and enclosure. Anyone who is caught trespassing will bear personal responsibility for his ensuing death. So it ends by saying this. Anyone who trespasses will be responsible for what? His own death. His own death. Now here's the irony of this. This, according to ancient literature, was the only time the Romans allowed the Jews to practice capital punishments. Okay? There's this speech from Titus, is where we get this. It's debated, but the speech from Titus seems to be the only time you make this argument. The Romans actually allowed the Jews, which is unheard of, but this was the one case, supposedly, they could carry out capital punishment. If a Gentile went past that sign, they would be allowed to kill him. Now, there's no evidence in literature it ever happened, but based on this speech from Titus, it supposedly is the only time. Now, these warning signs, we have excavated 2 of them. You can find them online now. The last article I read on them, there's one in the Museum of Istanbul, and another is in a museum in Jerusalem. You can find these now, and they basically say if you pass this line, you're going to die at your own risk. Enter at your own risk, or you will die. So we have these signs right now, okay? And literally, this seems to be the one time they would have allowed capital punishment to be carried out. So Paul's in real trouble at this point. He's in serious trouble because although he's not a Gentile, he allowed a Gentile, possibly even escorted a Gentile to that point in time. And no, they're not going after the Gentile. They're not Trophimus. No one can. You know why no one can find? Why they can't go after Trophimus? Because Paul didn't do it. Trophimus ain't there, so he's not even there. And that's one of the reasons he shows he's innocent. And although Luke insists that Paul is innocent, and Paul himself will insist in Acts 24, he wasn't there. And I would say, how about somebody grab Trophimus? Oh, you can't grab him? Because he ain't here. That's what I think I said at that point in time, but no one's listening. And this doesn't stop the Jews who take vehement action against Paul. Read verse 30.
Then all the city was stirred up, and the people ran together. They seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut.
This is where it gets confusing. You've got to read the text in Greek to get more ideas and the commentaries into this. This is where I had to cut a lot of notes out. I was running out of ink. Fourfold description, but I just want you to know 2 things. One, the disturbance was widespread. Now, people say, well, this seems like hyperbole or exaggeration. We are in a religious pilgrimage. Okay? We're already in a time where cultural sensitivities are high. And now we've got somebody bringing a Gentile into the temple. No. We want a reason to riot. You just gave us a reason to riot. And that's what they're saying at this point in time, okay? So there's a widespread disturbance where all these religious pilgrimage and everybody's already emotionally charged. There's this emotionally aroused and agitated sentiment going on in the air. And then they forcibly remove Paul from the inner courts. This could be anywhere from the court of men to the court of women, but somewhere in that area, okay? He's in the inner temple proper is where he is. They're going to violently drag him probably out to the court of Gentiles, okay? Once they get to the court of Gentiles, the temple police are going to run and slam the gates shut from anything from the court of women forward, okay? So we're going to have the gates shut from the court of women to the court of Gentiles. The reason for that is, if you're going to beat somebody and you're going to kill somebody, you can't do it in the court of women forward because that would defile the temple. And we don't want to defile the temple because we're not going to do that. We're good holy Jews. We're not going to defile him. We'll kill this guy.
Yeah, we're going
to kill him. But we're going to kill him over on this part of the ground. Okay, that's what's happening right here. So they want to do that. They want to make sure they don't defile the temple, which is irony there, by the way. And they want to keep the gate shut from Paul re-entering, because if he were to somehow escape, technically he could claim refuge. And so we want to keep from defiling his place and allowing him to claim refuge. So we're going to take him, we're going to beat him, and we're going to try to kill him, but we're going to do it in the court of the Gentile area. And it's possible they take him further out, but we know at the very least at this point they shut those gates. We're in the court of Gentiles in the beating process. And it goes on and on. It's very vivid in the Greek. It is lots and lots of people beating this man with every intention of killing him. Okay? Many picking up stones and throwing. Everyone punching, kicking, scratching, biting. I mean, they are trying to kill him. Pelting him with, you name it, they're doing it. They pick it up, they hit him with it. Everything they can do to this man, they're trying to kill him at this point. And this leads to verse 31.
And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. Basically,
the commotion in the outer courts gets the attention of the Romans. And basically, this large crowd of angry, shouting Jews, who's engaged in mob violence, who's attempting to lynch Paul, somehow gets the attention of the Romans in the fortress Antonia, which is the northwest fortress overlooking the temple, who the soldiers either see the commotion from their high post or it gets reported to them. And in particular, it gets reported to the tribune, who is Claudius Lysias. He is a high-ranking military official over at least 1,000 soldiers. Okay? At this point in time, he would more than likely be the highest-ranking Roman official there. So that makes him the most powerful man in the city, basically. Okay? Because the procurator lives in Caesarea, and he only visits from time to time. Okay? So he's probably not there. So this is going to make him probably the highest man up. And he really only has one job. He's not only a military man and the highest man up right now, but what is his one main job, you think?
Keep the peace.
Keep the peace. Maintain order, maintain peace. That's all he's got to do. That's his one job. So he does whatever's necessary. So he springs into action in verse 32 and 33. Read that for us.
He at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the tribune came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. He inquired who he was and what he had done.
So they do come in and they stop beating Paul, but were they going to rescue Paul? Not at all. They could care less if this man died. There was not in at all. This is God's intervention, by the way. What happened? Lysias wastes no time. He's dealing with a riot. He is dealing with a Jewish riot, what he's doing right now. By the way, many people think the fortress of Antonia overlooking it. It was there because the Romans didn't trust the Jews and didn't like them. They suspected this kind of stuff was going to happen. So that's why they kept it the way they did. So they go in with a significant show of force. He goes in with centurions, plural. Okay? That means, yeah. Which means what? At very least, we got about approximately how many? 200. Yeah. And although some people think there's only 80 in a centurion, 200 right. So he's got at least 200 soldiers. 200 Roman soldiers, that's a lot. Okay? And maybe more. So they go in. They're coming, this frenzied mob immediately stops. They're like, oh, now the professional beaters are here, but they stop because they know they'll die otherwise. So they stop, and since Paul is the object of the beating, they arrest him. Now, in our line of thought, we go, oh, what is that? That's not fair. Why would you do that if you're a Roman?
It's the root cause. You get the root cause.
Yeah, you want to know what's going on. Yeah, we want to stop this thing. We're not politically correct. We're smart. And by being smart, we're taking out the root cause. And that's what happens here. We're taking him out because this is who they're beating, obviously. And this will stop the right one. And we need to know what's going on. And who better knows what's going on than the guy getting beat? Yeah. And so at this point, that's what they're saying. So they immediately arrest him and they bound him in chains. This should bring to your mind something from earlier. A certain prophecy by a certain prophet. Remember him? What did he say?
Paul was going to get bound.
That's right. He took the belt, and what he said is the Jews basically going to be responsible. Yeah. In the end, were the Jews responsible?
Yep.
Yes. Okay? And now here he is in chains, just like the prophecy foretold. And here he is in these chains, and they're going to take him. They can't figure out what's going on. They're going to interview him. And now 34 to 36.
Some in the crowd were shouting one thing, some another. And as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. And when he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. For the mob of the people followed, crying out, "Away with him!"
All right, so all 34 just describes noise. If you read it in the Greek, it just means noise. There's a bunch of noise going on, which is problematic because it means there's confusion and uproars going on with everybody shouting different things. If you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you got a big crowd of people shouting different things, what's that going to impede you from doing? Figure out what's going on. Yeah, you're not going to have a clue. And so this is going to impede the investigation of Lysias and make it impossible for him to ascertain any substantive accusations against Paul because there's disorder and he can't figure out what's going on. And then in verse 35 to 36, as they're trying to transfer Paul from the outer courts back to the Antonia fortress, what's going on? The crowd are still doing what?
Away with him.
Still going crazy. And it's possible he is so weak at this point he can't move. We don't know. But one thing's for certain, the crowd is still trying to beat, yank, kick, scratch, bite, tear, do whatever they can to this man. And so these soldiers have to pick him up and guard him and get him out of there. So the Roman soldiers will have to pick Paul up and protect him from the crowd violence and get him in to the Roman fortress, the Roman barracks. So they pick him up, they carry him. They're basically, Paul's safety at this point is being threatened. And they're not doing it, by the way, to rescue Paul once again. It turns out that the Roman official who's in charge thinks Paul is this Egyptian political revolutionary who's wanted. And the reason he probably rescues Paul at this point is he thinks he has found the most wanted man in the Middle East, and he thinks he's about to get a big prize from the Roman officials. So that's probably why he rescues Paul at this point in time. Well, see, just so you see what I'm talking about, read for us quickly, verse 37 through 40.
As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek? Are you not the Egyptian then who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness?"
Okay. So what happens is he thinks he has found the man that Felix is looking for. And he's seeing dollar signs or rank something. He's no personal gain in this. And then Paul talks. And Paul's fluent in Greek. Okay? Now, it's not that Egyptians couldn't speak Greek. It's just when Egyptians spoke, what is that kind of broken English? Okay, Cajun. No one's Cajun. I don't want to offend anybody. But when Cajuns talk, it's broken English. You can barely understand it. Right. But when Egyptians spoke Greek, that's what he sounded like, a Cajun speaking English. But when Paul spoke Greek, he sounded like a Harvard scholar. Okay, so he was very good. And so at this point in time, the Roman guy goes, "You are not that Egyptian because your Greek is too good. What is going on here?" And so he thought he was this Egyptian political insurrectionist who was leading these assassins, who Josephus has a big record on, and we'll get into this later. And so it almost gets let down, but then he goes, "Well, you're a great speaker. Okay, I'll let you talk to the crowd, so we'll see how this goes later." But that is probably the only reason why he rescues Paul at this point, is he thinks he's this other guy that's going to make him look good for capturing. Because he's one of the most wanted men in the Middle East at that time. So that's where we'll stop because we're out of time. Do you have any questions?
I do have a question.
Okay.
That's just little.
No, that's okay. Go ahead and ask.
All right, when the curtain in the holies of holies was ripped, that let the Spirit of God out. I mean, he was no longer right there. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say it let the Spirit of God out, but what I would say is it let us in. How about that? We'll say that. Ephesians 2 gets into this. The dividing wall is ripped. Ephesians 2, towards the second half of it, like 12 or 14 forward, it gets into that. And remember, the temple was never somewhere that God was confined like a box, but it's where we could meet and worship, but still we were restricted. Once the dividing wall is torn down, we have access into His direct presence. So I would word it, instead of saying it let God out, it let us in. I would just word it like that, look at it like you're saying.
So my question, so they still, after that, they still do the exact same practices, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, this is where a Christian you couldn't. Okay? A Christian Jew, the Jew still did, yes. But a Christian Jew couldn't look at the temple the same. Okay? He couldn't look at it as the one place where God and man met, because now the new center of worship was Jesus Christ. He couldn't look at the sacrifices the same, like now this is atoning, because the true atoning sacrifice was Jesus Christ. So a Jewish Christian could not view it that way. Although he could maintain his Jewish practices, he had to alter his view of things. So that I'll say that and add to it as well. But yes, did the Jews keep doing what the Jews did? Yes. Yes, they did.
So did God still move in that? Because I know like there was no more.
He did not. He did not. Once that temple rips, God is absent from it. Okay. As a matter of fact, most people think even here, this is the last time the temple is seen in Acts. And the last time you see the temple seen in Acts, the gates are shut, which seems to symbolize God's access and presence is no longer there. It's showing that right there. So yes. So God no longer works with it. Once Jesus raises from the dead and that temple rips, God no longer works with the temple at all.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Yes, and that's your answer there. And the final destruction of that happens in AD 70 with the destruction of it, and that becomes the physical symbol of what happened with the curtain in that act right there. So the literal act. Very good question. Anything else?
Temple that resides inside the person.
Yes, very good. See, I'm big on that in eschatology as well, brother. And see, a lot of people don't understand how deep the statement you just made is. We're the temple now. We are the true temple. And that's big in eschatology, but I won't get into all that. But amen, amen, amen. Anything else? Nothing else? All right. Told you it was going to be short. We got 5 minutes to spare. All right, Brother Steve, go ahead and pray. You're up.
Heavenly Father, thank you so very much that we can come together and understand and study the Word so we can understand it better. Lord, it's just imperative that we learn what's in this book so that we can have a guide to our lives and we won't be lost like the Jews were back then, like so many people are still today. And that, as Brother Arnold said, the temple is within us now. And we need to learn how to properly use that and worship you and come to you and be able to just fully understand. So thank you so very much for Brother Shep that's trying to lead us down this road as hard as we are sometimes to teach. But we do love him and appreciate him. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You did good.